Good evening, and welcome to our special broadcast. Tonight we delve into a question that stands at the forefront of medical ethics and technological advancement. Should humans be genetically modified to resist diseases? This is a topic laden with immense potential and profound ethical considerations, sparking debate among scientists, ethicists, and the public alike. We are privileged to have with us two distinguished experts to navigate this complex terrain. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a renowned geneticist, who will argue in favor of the responsible application of genetic modification, and Ms. Sarah Chen, a sociologist and bioethics commentator who will present the arguments against, raising concerns about the broader societal and ethical ramifications. Our debate will proceed with opening statements from each speaker, followed by rebuttals, a moderated discussion, and concluding remarks. We aim for a comprehensive exploration of this significant issue. Dr. Tanaka, would you please begin with your opening statement?
Thank you, Dr. Reed. We stand at a precipice of unprecedented medical breakthrough, where human ingenuity offers us the tools to potentially conquer some of the most devastating diseases known to humankind. The core of my argument is this: genetic modification, when applied judiciously and ethically, presents an unparalleled opportunity to alleviate immense human suffering and significantly enhance the quality of life for millions. Consider conditions like Huntington's disease, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, or predispositions to certain aggressive cancers. These are not abstract threats, but tangible realities that shatter lives and families. Genetic modification could offer not just treatment but prevention, conferring resistance before these diseases ever manifest. The advent of precise gene editing technologies, most notably CRISPR-Cas9, has revolutionized our capability in this field. These tools allow for targeted alterations to the genome with increasing accuracy, minimizing the risks of off-target effects that were a concern with earlier, less sophisticated methods. This isn't about fundamentally altering what it means to be human in some arbitrary way. It's about correcting genetic errors that lead to profound suffering. We must view this in the context of medical progress. Vaccines, antibiotics, and organ transplantation were also once novel and debated, yet they have become indispensable pillars of modern medicine, saving countless lives. I acknowledge that ethical questions are paramount. However, these concerns should guide us towards establishing robust regulatory frameworks, stringent oversight, and transparent public discourse, not towards a complete moratorium on potentially life-saving research and application. Initially, the focus should be, and largely is, on somatic cell modifications. That is, changes that affect only the individual patient and are not heritable. This approach allows us to address disease within a contained ethical boundary, distinct from the more complex considerations of germline modification, which would affect future generations. The potential to extend healthy lifespans, to free individuals from the certainty of inherited illness, is a humanitarian imperative we cannot afford to ignore out of fear or excessive skepticism.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Ms. Chen, we now turn to you for your opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Dr. Tanaka paints an undeniably alluring picture of a future free from certain diseases, and the desire to alleviate suffering is one we all share. However, I contend that the path of genetically modifying humans, even with the stated intention of disease resistance, is fraught with profound ethical dilemmas, societal risks, and potentially irreversible biological consequences that we are ill-equipped to manage. My primary concern revolves around the concept of the, quote, slippery slope. While the initial focus might be on clearly defined severe diseases, the boundary between, quote, medical treatment and genetic enhancement is notoriously porous. Who decides what constitutes a disease versus an undesirable trait? Could conditions like short stature, predispositions to mild allergies, or even certain psychological traits eventually be framed as medical issues ripe for, quote, correction? This could inexorably lead to a society deeply divided along genetic lines, the genetic haves who can afford these modifications, and the have-nots who cannot, creating a biological underclass and exacerbating existing inequalities in an unprecedented manner. Furthermore, our understanding of the human genome, despite remarkable advances, remains incomplete. Genes interact in complex, often unpredictable ways, and epigenetic factors play a significant role that we are only beginning to comprehend. Altering the human gene pool, a legacy shared by all future generations, carries the risk of unforeseen and potentially deleterious long-term consequences for human health, evolution, and our relationship with the environment. Are we prepared to accept such a gamble? The potential for misuse is also a grave concern. In a world where commercial interests often drive scientific development, and where authoritarian regimes could seek to exploit such technologies for eugenic purposes, the notion of purely benevolent application seems dangerously naive. Finally, I believe our resources and ingenuity might be better directed towards addressing the social determinants of health, poverty, lack of access to clean water and nutrition, inadequate education, and inequitable access to existing health care. These factors contribute massively to the global disease burden, and are addressable without resorting to high-tech, high-risk interventions that could fundamentally alter our species.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. Dr. Tanaka, you now have the opportunity for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Ms. Chen raises important points, particularly regarding the, quote, slippery slope and the potential for societal division. However, to dismiss a technology with such immense therapeutic potential based on fears of misuse is, I believe, a disservice to those currently suffering. The slippery slope argument is a common refrain against many technological advancements. The existence of potential misuse does not negate the profound benefits when a technology is applied responsibly within a robust ethical and regulatory framework. We don't ban automobiles because they can be driven recklessly. We implement traffic laws and safety standards. Similarly, stringent international guidelines, ethical review boards, and transparent processes can be established to ensure genetic modification is confined to therapeutic applications for severe, universally recognized debilitating diseases. The definition of, quote, disease in this context would not be arbitrary, but would focus on conditions causing significant suffering and mortality, such as Tay-Sachs, Huntington's, or Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Regarding the precision of techniques like CRISPR, while no technology is entirely without risk, the advancements are significant and ongoing. The risk of off-target effects is being progressively minimized through continued research and refinement of these tools. We must weigh these manageable risks against the certain and devastating risks faced by individuals with severe genetic predispositions if we choose not to intervene. To deny access to potentially life-saving or life-altering therapies based on hypothetical future abuses is, in itself, an ethical failing. It condemns individuals to preventable suffering. Our focus should be on developing safeguards, not on outright prohibition of research that offers so much hope. The argument that we should solely focus on social determinants of health, while valid in its own right, presents a false dichotomy. We can and should pursue both avenues, improving public health infrastructure and investing in cutting-edge medical research that addresses diseases at their genetic roots.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Ms. Chen, your rebuttal, please.
Dr. Tanaka's faith in regulatory frameworks is admirable, but perhaps overly optimistic. In our globalized world, ensuring universal adherence to stringent ethical guidelines for a technology as powerful as gene editing is an immense, if not insurmountable, challenge. We already witness disparities in how various nations approach contentious scientific research. What is to prevent, quote, genetic tourism, or the development of these technologies in jurisdictions with laxer standards, effectively bypassing any well-intentioned regulations established elsewhere? Regarding the long-term consequences, Dr. Tanaka speaks of manageable risks. Yet, the human genome is a product of millions of years of evolution. To assume we can make targeted changes without triggering a cascade of unforeseen and potentially harmful effects in the long run, effects that may not manifest for generations, is an assertion of confidence that I believe our current scientific understanding does not fully warrant. This isn't merely about off-target edits in an individual. It's about the subtle, complex interplay of genes and the potential for disrupting delicate biological balances. Some might term this the playing God argument, but I frame it as a call for profound humility before biological systems of such staggering complexity. Furthermore, the issue of equitable access remains a critical stumbling block, even if the initial intent is purely therapeutic. These are likely to be expensive, cutting-edge treatments. How do we prevent a scenario where only the affluent can afford to edit out disease predispositions, thereby creating a tangible biological advantage that deepens existing socioeconomic divides? The comparison to vaccines is also somewhat misleading. Vaccines work by stimulating the body's natural immune system. Somatic gene editing is a more fundamental alteration of an individual's genetic makeup. And if the conversation ever realistically shifts towards germline modification, which is often the implicit long-term trajectory for proponents, then we are talking about heritable changes to the human species, a far more profound intervention than any vaccine.
Thank you both for your compelling rebuttals. We will now move into a moderated discussion. Dr. Tanaka, Ms. Chen raises a crucial point about equitable access. How would you propose to ensure that these potentially revolutionary therapies do not become privileges of the wealthy, thereby exacerbating the genetic divide she described?
That is an entirely valid concern, Dr. Reed. The issue of equitable access is critical for any new medical technology, and genetic therapies are no exception. Initially, as with many cutting-edge treatments, costs may be high. However, history shows that as technologies mature and scale, costs tend to decrease. Furthermore, public health systems and international collaborations could play a vital role in subsidizing or providing these therapies to ensure they reach those who need them most, irrespective of their financial standing. It requires a global commitment to health equity.
Ms. Chen, let me pose a challenging hypothetical to you. If genetic modification could definitively and safely prevent a child from inheriting a horrific and fatal disease like Tay-Sachs, where a child is born seemingly healthy, but then suffers progressive neurological deterioration and typically dies by age 4, would your position against genetic intervention remain absolute?
That is indeed a profoundly difficult scenario, Dr. Reed, and one that evokes deep compassion. The suffering associated with diseases like Tay-Sachs is undeniable, and any parent would want to prevent it. In such an extreme and clear-cut case, focus solely on preventing a catastrophic, early-onset fatal disease through somatic therapy, the ethical calculus becomes more nuanced. However, even in such cases, I would insist on extreme caution, rigorous oversight, and a clear understanding that this does not open the door to broader applications. The challenge lies in drawing and holding that line. My concern is that such heart-wrenching cases are often used as emotional leverage to justify a much wider and riskier agenda.
Dr. Tanaka, what specific safeguards, beyond general regulatory frameworks, would you propose to prevent the technology from being used for non-therapeutic enhancements, should somatic therapies become commonplace and effective?
This is a critical point. Safeguards must be multi-layered. Firstly, a clear legal and ethical distinction between therapy and enhancement needs to be internationally codified, focusing on conditions that cause significant impairment to health or quality of life. Secondly, independent oversight bodies comprising scientists, ethicists, patient advocates, and public representatives should review and approve applications for genetic therapies on a case-by-case basis, ensuring adherence to strict criteria. Thirdly, there must be a prohibition on advertising or promoting genetic interventions for enhancement purposes. Continuous public education and discourse are also vital to maintain societal consensus on these boundaries.
Ms. Chen, are there any circumstances, perhaps beyond the extreme example of Tay-Sachs, under which you might see a justifiable use for human genetic modification for disease resistance, assuming the technology matures and risks are demonstrably minimized?
If, and this is a significant if, the technology reached a stage of proven safety with no long-term detrimental effects, and if its application was strictly limited to severe, life-threatening monogenic disorders where no other viable treatment exists, and if access was truly equitable, then perhaps a very narrow window for justifiable use in somatic cells could be considered. However, my skepticism remains profound regarding our ability to meet all those, quote, ifs simultaneously, especially concerning unforeseen long-term consequences and the pressures towards broader applications. The distinction between somatic and germline modification is often presented as a clear ethical firewall, but I worry it's a permeable one. Once the technology is perfected for somatic use, the temptation and arguments for applying it to germline cells to, quote, eradicate diseases from family lines permanently will become immense. And that opens an entirely new Pandora's box of heritable changes to the human species.
Dr. Tanaka, how do you view that distinction between somatic and germline modifications in terms of adequately addressing ethical concerns? Is the current focus on somatic therapy a sufficient safeguard?
The distinction is currently a crucial ethical and practical boundary. Somatic therapies affect only the individual treated, aligning with established principles of personal medical autonomy. Germline modifications, which alter sperm, eggs, or embryos, result in heritable changes passed down through generations. This raises far more complex ethical questions about consent. Future generations cannot consent, the integrity of the human gene pool, and unforeseen evolutionary consequences. While I believe the immediate and primary focus must remain on somatic therapies for severe diseases, I do not think we should permanently foreclose the discussion on germline modifications for preventing devastating hereditary conditions, provided there is overwhelming scientific consensus on safety and broad societal agreement, which we are very far from achieving currently. For now, maintaining a strict prohibition on heritable human genome editing is essential.
And how do you both see the role of public perception and democratic deliberation in deciding the future of such potent technologies? Who should ultimately make these decisions?
Public perception and broad societal deliberation are absolutely indispensable. These are not decisions that can be left solely to scientists or policymakers. There needs to be a transparent, inclusive, and ongoing global conversation that educates the public about the science, the potential benefits, and the profound ethical and societal risks. Ultimately, decisions of this magnitude, which concern the future of humanity, must be guided by democratically accountable processes and reflect a societal consensus, not just the technological imperative or commercial interests.
I concur entirely with Ms. Chen on the necessity of public engagement. Scientists have a responsibility to clearly communicate their research, including its limitations and potential societal impacts. Democratic deliberation, informed by expert advice but not dictated by it, is the appropriate path forward. Mechanisms for such deliberation could include citizen assemblies, public consultations, and robust debate within legislative bodies. The goal is to ensure that the development and application of these technologies align with societal values and the common good.
Thank you both. We now move to closing statements. Dr. Tanaka, please.
Thank you. We have explored many facets of this complex issue. I wish to reiterate that human genetic modification, approached with wisdom and ethical rigor, holds profound humanitarian potential to alleviate suffering and dramatically improve human health. The prospect of freeing future generations from the scourge of diseases like cystic fibrosis or Huntington's is not a distant dream, but an approaching reality if we choose to pursue it responsibly. Medical and scientific progress has always required courage. Courage to explore the unknown, to challenge existing paradigms, and to develop new tools, even when faced with uncertainty. This courage must be tempered with profound responsibility, careful oversight, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles. I advocate not for unchecked advancement, but for continued cautious research, open and honest international dialogue, and the collaborative development of strong, adaptable ethical guidelines. Let us not be paralyzed by fear of hypothetical misuse, but rather be guided by compassion, by scientific evidence, and by the relentless human aspiration for a healthier future. The potential benefits for humanity are simply too significant to abandon.
Thank you, Dr. Tanaka. Ms. Chen, your closing statement.
Thank you. While the compassionate impulse driving the pursuit of genetic cures is understandable, we must not allow our enthusiasm for technological prowess to blind us to the significant, potentially irreversible risks and profound ethical quandaries that human genetic modification presents. The conversations we've had tonight underscore the immense complexities involved. We must resist technological determinism, the notion that if something can be done, it inevitably must be done. We have a choice, and that choice must involve a deep consideration of the societal, human, and ecological costs, not just the perceived scientific or medical benefits. The potential for unintended consequences on the human gene pool, the risk of exacerbating social inequalities, and the slippery slope towards non-therapeutic enhancement remain grave concerns. I urge that our primary focus and resources be directed towards proven, equitable avenues for improving public health worldwide. Before we embark on a path that involves altering the very blueprint of our species, a path with such transformative and unpredictable consequences, we need profound caution, extensive societal reflection, and an unwavering commitment to our shared humanity that transcends our genetic makeup. Let wisdom and foresight be our guides.
Thank you, Ms. Chen, and thank you, Dr. Tanaka, for your insightful and thought-provoking contributions to this vital discussion. You have both articulated your positions with clarity and conviction, highlighting the multifaceted nature of this issue. Tonight, we've heard compelling arguments for the potential of genetic modification to eradicate disease and alleviate suffering, juxtaposed with serious warnings about unforeseen consequences, ethical pitfalls, and the potential for societal disruption. It is clear that there are no easy answers. The debate over human genetic modification is one that will, and indeed must, continue as science progresses. It requires our ongoing public engagement, rigorous ethical reflection, and a commitment to navigating the future with both wisdom and compassion. Thank you to our audience.